Hello and welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you with us today. We are just going to give it about another minute for more people to join. But just as we are waiting, if you don't mind just dropping in the chat where you're joining us from today. It's always nice to see where people are coming in from, and you might see somebody that's in the town next door. So go ahead and just while we're waiting, drop in the chat where you are joining us from today.
Shout out to my friend Mark, who's with York County. I see him on the line. Hi, Mark.
Love. Yeah, I see a lot of familiar names. So thank you to those that are joining us again.
That's great.
Yes. Excellent. Hope everyone's doing well today. We are having a little bit of rain here in DC, so it's kind of one of those dreary days, but tomorrow we're going to hit the 80s, so we are here for it. Excellent. We're just going to give it another minute more. Hello, Mark. Love seeing the enthusiasm.
Yeah, I spent some time with him last year, so love that community.
And we are joined by our one and only Karen McCrae. It's her birthday today. Let's give a happy birthday shout out to Karen. I'm going to embarrass her here. On the count of three, we're going to start singing. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, I can get it started. Don't
yeah,
even
okay, Kuma, you ready to tag team this?
I will. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. No.
Really quickly. Happy birthday
to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Karen. Happy birthday
to you. Wow, Kuma, we knocked it out of the park. We should hit Broadway.
It's like a gift I give to everyone who I know really personally. I call them on their birthday and sing the song. So it's nothing for me to sing it. I love it. But happy birthday, Karen.
Yes. And to those that do not yet know Karen, she is, she's the reason why Institute happens. She puts in all the hard work, oversees the team. So happy birthday, Karen. And thank you, Kuma. That was an adrenaline rush.
Yep.
All right, well, we are going to go ahead and get started. Warm welcome to everyone, and love seeing where everyone's coming in from today. We've got New Hampshire, Virginia, some South Carolina. Oh, hello, Sandy. Some Illinois, Wisconsin. We've got some DC here. So if you want, just drop in the chat where you're coming in from. California. Love to see some representation across the US. So it's really cool to see that. Just as a quick note, because Institute is a CAE and CCE accredited provider, this webinar does count and qualify as one CAE credit. Yes, 1 hour of CAE credit and 1 point for CCE credit. You can go ahead and request the certificate by emailing us, and I will drop in the chat the iom@uschamber.com. So go ahead, and if you are looking and interested in receiving credit, go ahead and email us. We do ask that if you have any questions throughout the webinar, that you either drop those in the chat or that you hold those until the end. We will have a little bit of time at the end to answer any questions. And just without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Kuma. She is the partner and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Arrowhead Consulting, which is a project management, leadership and development boutique. A boutique project management, leadership management, and executive coaching firm in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She is an incredible faculty member and well-loved in the Institute family. We're really excited and lucky to hear from her today. So without any further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Kuma.
Thank you, Cece. Hello, my chamber peeps. It's so great to see you all today on this amazing hump day. I'm Kuma Roberts, and today we're going to talk about the why of DEI, something I'm really, really passionate about and can't wait to share a little bit with you about this topic. But before I really get started, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about me. I am a new partner here at Arrowhead Consulting in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but had done 11, 10 years at the Tulsa Regional Chamber as a variety of roles, but left there as the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So really passionate about the work and decided to do it full time and consult in this space. And I love helping my chamber partners because I know that world so well. And this work is so important to the work that you all do. So with that being said, just quickly, I want to share just one slide about Arrowhead. As she mentioned, we are a boutique consulting firm. We have about 15 employees. We're in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We do this work all the time. We're focused on project management. We love leadership development and coaching, as well as talent management, change management, organizational effectiveness, and of course, DEI. So if you have any of those needs, please feel free to reach out to me. Well, so today we're going to talk and really cover 3 primary areas of the conversation today. The objectives are, I want you all to have a really clear understanding around the words diversity, equity, and inclusion, because they cause so much consternation for many of us in our communities. And that sort of understanding of what the words even mean can be probably a lot of the problem you might be experiencing in your community. So we want to talk about that. I'm going to help you all raise awareness and, of course, increase your awareness for the sensitivity of workplace DEI issues that could be impacting your organization. And then we're going to, and I'm going to share and recommend some tools for building that business case, that why for DEI in your organization. So before we get started, let's get into it. I really like to start with the evolution of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's important to know where it came from, how it all got started, and how we are where we are in 2023. So this work started probably in earnest 50 years ago. And we were really focused at that point on the compliance case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Ultimately, DEI or diversity alone was just about a numbers game. And ultimately, it was something that companies were forced to do. They were forced to I need one Black, one Asian, one person of difference. It was just sort of a quota thing. And that's how D&I got started, or diversity and inclusion got started. Then about 30 years ago, we moved into the values case, and we started hearing, I know many of you have heard it all the time, it's just the right thing to do. We do this because it's the right thing to do. And I do my hand like this because, of course, we want to really lean in on the right thing to do, what is in people's hearts, sort of that servant mindset that we hope people have toward helping the greater good. But that alone wasn't enough to really advance DEI. What had to happen was it really needed that business case, that piece where businesses can sort of speak to their personal why, right? Promote the benefits to the community as a result of their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's called the business case. And that became the smart thing to do. And now we're moving into, certainly in 2023 and beyond, I see us moving into making the equity case in terms of our organizations, where we're focused on it being the right, the smart, and ultimately the profitable thing to do for your people and for the businesses that are ultimately members of your organization. So we are moving beyond the business case and into the equity case and really crafting and cultivating our why for why we do this work. I also want to share just a little bit of a difference in this transformational shift that's been happening over the past 50 years. With that classic approach where it was just all about diversity, government compliance, where it was really just about the numbers of diverse people. That was really the whole point of how this all got started. But then we moved into leveraging existing best practices. We got beyond just the numbers of diverse people and started to get into how those diverse people feel in our organizations. And then now we're moving into diversity, equity, and inclusion, that smart, right, and profitable thing to do, where we get the full spectrum participation enabled by everybody in your organization. So every single person, regardless of viewpoint, political, race, ability, where everyone feels like they have the opportunity to be seen, heard, valued, and respected as a part of your organization. One of the ways I like to do this is to talk about the organizational iceberg. It's a visual that I think really highlights what's going wrong as you all are thinking about the why for your D&I. As chambers especially, we are positioned to talk about our strategy, our structure, our policy, our procedure, our mission, our values, all of these really big words that say how we do our work in our organizations. And that's wonderful. We all have to have those things. But as we look into the work about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that work is about looking beneath the surface. What's happening beneath the surface? Those personal values, your personal feelings, the norms, the traditions, the history of your organization, how it came to be. You look at the biases, the stories, the perceptions, all of those things are sort of churning underneath the surface, and you have to remove the waterline. That's the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, is to remove that waterline, and that there is no difference between how you say the work gets done, what's on top, and what happens down below. We want to make sure that it's all completely transparent and everyone understands that we are operating from what's below and above the surface within our organizations. One of the ways I believe that we can do that better, remove that waterline, is to really think about and craft shared language. That is your starting point. As you all are beginning to think about your why of DEI, start with creating some shared language about the meaning of those words, not just to you personally, but to your organization, to your community, to the people that you're serving, to your members. It would be really important to get a good grasp of that. Because language is the roadmap of a culture. It tells you where its people come from and where they are going. And so today, we're going to use this time together to build some shared language. And it's one of my favorite things to do, because I think these definitions might be a little bit outside of what you're used to hearing when you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity is all the ways in which people differ. We know what that looks like because I typically give an introduction of myself where I say I'm diversity personified. I'm in an interracial, intergenerational marriage with my husband. He's 33 years older than me. I'm the career woman. He's the stay-at-home dad. My father is an African immigrant. My mother is a Southern Baptist. Like, I have all of these elements that make me who I am, that make me a diverse individual. And so many of those elements don't center on just my race and my gender. Man, I've been divorced. I've been a cheer mom. I mean, every single one of those aspects connects me to each one of you in some way. I'm sure we have something in common. So the diversity is really all the ways in which we differ, all the amazing ways in which we differ. And then there's equity. And equity is one of those things that as a chamber, I know as a person who's formerly worked at a chamber, that we have a lot of trouble really understanding what equity means. And so we'll talk about that. But the definition I want to give you all today is equity is the fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all people, where one's identity does not predict the outcome of their lives. And I just want to add a little bit of color to that. What do I mean when I say one's identity cannot predict the outcome of their life? Well, I'm telling you that here in Tulsa, if you were born in zip code 74106, which is a predominantly African-American community here in Tulsa, you live automatically 12 years less than someone who lives in any other part of our city. Equity says, why would that be? Why would someone's identity predict the outcome of their lives, the success or failure in their life? So when we talk about equity, it's not a handout. It's not something we give to people unearned. It's really trying to identify that fair treatment, the right access, the right opportunity, so that one's identity does not predict the outcome of their lives. So that's one definition I really love sharing with people, and we will drill down on that a little bit more. But then lastly, there's inclusion. Inclusion makes me laugh because we all have it in our core values. We say we're inclusive. We are an inclusive community. We're an inclusive organization. But what inclusion really means is that a variety of people have power, voice, and decision-making authority. So all of those ways in which we differ, there's representation when it comes to inclusion, and all of that representation has power, has voice, and decision-making authority within your organization. That is what true inclusion is, and we'll break down that a little bit more as well. So since we're building shared language, let's take a little bit of a deeper look at diversity, because that's one of the things that I think we often get wrong when we're thinking about the why for our DEI. Sorry about that. What is diversity, right? Well, diversity is all the things I mentioned, right? It's not just race and gender. I talk about race extensively because I'm a Black woman, but there's so many aspects of what make me who I am. And so I wanted to show you this matrix of just a variety of diversity elements that we have at our disposal that we often don't think about. We don't think about religion or mental health or military veteran or cultural diversity or even remote or hybrid workers, full-time, part-time, pregnancy leave, refugee status. These are all elements of diversity that we just say, we need diversity. We need to find Black people. We need to find Latinx, brown people, right? Or women. And we don't think about all these other elements that people can bring to our organizations that add diversity. So I want to share just some statistics around some of those population groups and let you know that you're missing out on really big opportunities to widen your funnel for diversity within your organization if you aren't thinking about trying to relate, engage, and attract more of these different types of population groups. The first one I want to share with you is the refugee and immigrant population. Huge population, certainly for us here in Oklahoma, and I'm sure in your own communities, because there's a trend all the way around that this population is growing across the nation. In fact, 13.5% of the American population currently is foreign born, and by 2030, migration will be the primary driver of growth. So if you're not thinking about translation, if you're not thinking about how to crosswalk some of the skills they might have gained in colleges or education from their country of origin into your community, or you're not thinking about reaching out or community outreach with populations that are refugee or immigrant, you're missing out on potentially 13.5 of the population, percent of the population that can add to your organization's culture. And what a miss for us when we are just so focused on women and gender and race that we miss out on what could potentially be a huge add to our organization's why for DEI. Then there's ability. Ability is another huge area that we totally skip over. 1 in 4, or 26% of American adults identify as having a disability. It's the one minority group any one of us can enter at any time, and yet we don't ever think about how we're going to make sure that the wheelchair user can actually find their way and move about our event that we're having that night. Or how do we make sure that typically, we have subtitles showing so someone who might be hearing impaired can actually see the words I'm saying across the bottom of the screen. These are some really small tweaks that start to showcase your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion that has nothing to do with you just all of a sudden snapping your fingers and diversifying your board by 50%, but small incremental changes you can make that ultimately starts to reflect and showcase your organization's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm going to talk about the LGBTQ population as well, because 1 in 5, or 21% of the Gen Z adults identify as LGBTQIA, which stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual plus. So there's a bunch of identities there related in those few letters, and 21% of people identify as those identities. So if you're not thinking about same-sex marriage benefits as part of your insurance, if you're not thinking about non-gender bathrooms so that people can go into any bathroom and still feel comfortable, like you're missing out again on a population that could really help supercharge and catalyze your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So think about why you might be a no to this population and some of the others I've mentioned, because you're not honing in and getting really intentional about how to attract them into your organization. I also want to share this one about veterans, because this is one that just blows my mind every time I'm talking with another community across the country. In 2019, roughly 18 million people, guys, 18 million people, or 7% of the American adults identified as veterans with a variety of transferable skills. I mean, gosh, they have incredible work ethic. They've served our country admirably. They leave service and often flounder when they get back into their communities because we as employers, we as chambers, we as organizations can't think of how to really plug them in so that they can be seen as that value add to our culture. But they are there. There's a large populations of veterans who are just really looking, that would be perfectly primed, not only for your organizations, but for your members as part of your answer to why DEI is so important. Think about those veterans. They're really important. And then age. Millennials currently represent 35% of the global workforce and have overtaken the baby boomers as the largest generation in the workplace. My word, the millennials, not kids anymore, not standing outside of the Quick Trip or the Come and Go in your area, right, on their phones. They're like approaching 40 and they're in our workplaces and they're taking over the baby boomers. And they want workplace flexibility. They're looking for employers of choice. They're looking for organizations that get what it means to balance children and life and caregiving parents, right? We have to consider this population when we're thinking about our why for DEI. And this last one that I want to share with you all is just one that I think is just, it's so shocking to me. I've been doing some work with some criminal justice reform organizations around the nation. But 1 in 5 Americans has a criminal record. And if we are not thinking about how to make sure that our second chance individuals who've served their time in a different way to answer for their crimes, if we can't speak to how those people can re-enter society and not recreate or recommit crimes, then we're going to be a much better off community when we can plug them in, we can ban the box, we can get them further into the funnel in terms of filling some of our workforce needs. I'm not saying hire a murderer. I'm not saying hire someone with some really high offenses here. I'm saying let's look a little bit differently at how we approach someone with a criminal record who might have one, and how can we get them a little bit further in the funnel so we get to know them, not the crime, and how they can truly add as a value add to our organizations. Okay, so that's a little bit about diversity, and hopefully you get a sense of all of the different elements that make us all diverse and how you can at least begin to think about getting outside of the populations that we always go to in our minds when we think about diversity and our why. Let's get beyond those populations and engage them in terms of being an answer for our organizations on this topic. I want to leave you all with this quote as we finish talking about diversity because I love it. It just speaks to my heart on this. It says, diversity is a collection of minds and bodies from all walks of life, representing the breadth of the human experience. It means acknowledging our differences and not hiding from them. It represents the opportunity to use those differences to collectively better our understanding of the world, our lived experiences, and how those facets of an individual come together to form a unique human with a place in the world that has something to offer. That's ultimately what everyone's looking for. Every single one of those population groups is looking for, as are you for your organization. So think about harnessing diversity differently. The next word I want to drill a little bit more into was equity. Equity was one of those things that I mentioned has had a lot of misunderstanding around it. People think it's a handout. People think it's something that's unearned. I had the most sort of resistance when I tried to introduce a diversity and equity purpose statement for our organization that used the word equity in it versus equality in it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that means, what it means to be equitable. And it is not the same as equality. As you look at the screen, we can see the difference between equality and equity. Equality means everyone gets the same thing. Everyone gets the same thing. Our government has to operate that way because we can't tailor our response to health, education, criminal justice in a way that is tailored or customized for each individual. So we have to, as a country, operate from fairness, giving everyone the same thing. But your organization, your community, your businesses have the opportunity to do a little bit more intentional work for people, for individuals, for your community. And that's what equity means, that right access, right opportunity for people to thrive. So when we had COVID and everyone got 2 COVID tests, regardless of if your family had 8 people in it or 1 person in it, everyone got 2 tests. That's what it looks like to operate from equality. Everyone gets the same thing. Equity says, no, we appreciate that fairness bit, but we want to make sure that we're giving the right access, the right tool, the right resources so that communities can thrive. So as you can see in the picture, the woman who's in a wheelchair, she can't do anything with a standard bike. She can't use it. But if you give her something that's modified for her, something that fits her so that she's able to ride in that race, then that's what we want to do as communities. And that's what we want to do as organizations like Chambers, is provide the right tool and access for people within our community to thrive. Same for the guy who's really, really tall, riding a bike that's fit for his frame. He can sit upright, he can ride proudly. Same for the woman, and same for the child. I don't want you all to get hung up on the difference between equality and equity. They are two different things. But if we are seeking equity, if we're seeking to be more equitable, equality is the outcome. We'll get to a point where everything might work for everyone else. But in the meantime, we have to have a vehicle to get us there, and equity is the way to do that. I also like to talk about the equity lens, because I always am thinking about the equity lens. Equity lens is that checkpoint for accountability that we should all be using throughout any policy or decision-making effort. So as you think about what you want to do related to D&I, as you want to do an initiative for your community, you want to roll out something, that question about why and what might be the right tool, the right access for people so that they can take part in your organization, to be fully seen, heard, and valued within your organization, that's called using the equity lens. I like to say it's just about asking why. Why? Why do we do it this way? Why have we always done it this way? Why are we not seeing the numbers that we're hoping to find at this event? Why are we not seeing the kinds of people we'd like to see at our events? I was just talking with a client the other day, a Chamber of Commerce out of McKinney, Texas. They said last year they were struggling during Black History Month, because February is Black History Month. They had an event, small group of people, roughly 30 people. But they started leveraging the equity lens, asking, okay, this is an initiative we want to do. We want to partner more with chambers and organizations outside of ourselves. So they got really intentional about asking why. And ultimately this year they had well over 175 people, because they were thinking about that equity lens. How do we make sure that we have the right people, the right tool, the right access for our community to thrive? I want that for you all to use the equity lens. It's very important. Sometimes it's just 2 or 3 questions. Who's missing? What might be the impact of this effort? It doesn't have to be complicated. It's not some huge rubric. It's just like 1 or 2 questions that might get you closer to understanding what it is you'd like to see out of an initiative or an effort, in hopes that you can ultimately create some metrics to begin tracking as you move down that road. So we've talked about diversity, we've talked about equity. Let's move into inclusion, because it's one of those words that I think we use all the time. We all say we're inclusive, but it is truly where that diverse number of people has voice, power, and decision-making authority. Because we know what exclusion looks like, right? As you look at the screen, you see exclusion. It means all the difference that exists in our organizations is on the outside. Right? We remember Jim Crow. We know what it's like to live in a time where we are living in abject exclusion all across the board. But then we had integration, where we said, okay, difference, let's start intermixing with each other. And difference is present when we see integration, but it's not really embedded. It's still on the fringes. It's still on the edges of our organization. Inclusion is truly meaning that everyone is involved, everyone is connected, everyone is a part of this thing that is us, our organization. And so ultimately it boils down to this. Inclusion is everyone counts, everyone knows they count, and everyone knows they can count on each other. That's really what it means when you have inclusion within your organization. And I really want to break down that there are levels to inclusion. And sometimes you can be operating in one level and missing out on the other 2 or 3 levels that come after it. So everyone is seeking community, right? That community inclusion. And that's what we talk about when we say we're an inclusive organization. Community means you, that physical, emotional, cultural, intellectual, or spiritual vibe, the connection you have with people. That's when I have my work wife or my work husband. Mark's my work husband whenever I'm in South Carolina. My point is, community is what we're all hoping for when we talk about inclusion. That's great. That's great. But there's so many other levels to this thing. There's connection. Connection is not only do we have our work wives and our enjoyment and fun within our organization, what it means is, I'm so sorry, excuse me. It means that we have an emotional inclusion, which means we have meaningful relationships between majority and minority groups, not just Black, white, but dominant groups. City council is having meaningful conversations with your government affairs teams, meaningful conversations across across Black or underrepresented communities within your area, you're having meaningful conversation with your chamber and other organizations, or you're convening meaningful conversations. Everyone misses the fact that we have community, but we also need to have meaningful relationship and connection as a part of our inclusion. It also means that for our organization, you're missing out on potentially that contribution or that intellectual inclusion, which is where an individual is allowed to make a valued contribution, right? I'm CC and I get to come into work every day and create amazing classes with faculty for IOM, right? That's the contribution that she gets to bring. Everyone wants to be able to contribute positively to your organization. And so that's another level of inclusion we should all be seeking for our employees and for our members. And then there's contemplation. Contemplation is that spiritual inclusion where the individual is able to pursue meaning and purpose. So it sounds like that contributory, but meaning and purpose means I'm fulfilled. I'm doing and believing that I'm aligning with my core values, my personal core values. People want that contemplative viewpoint of inclusion, to feel like the organization they work for and participate with aligns with who they are as an individual. When you have an engaged community, connection, contribution, and contemplation, you don't have full inclusion, unfortunately, but you can get there. And we're going to talk a little bit more today about the why of DEI and why all of those things are so necessary. I personally am a junkie. I always read all the articles related to diversity, equity, inclusion because I'm really, really passionate about it. But I want to share some things from Deloitte and McKinsey, especially regarding just the business case or the why of DEI. The value of diversity, equity, and inclusion is about positively impacting the decision-making, the innovation, and ultimately the financial performance and the financial health of your organization. It means that inclusive teams make better business decisions 87% of the time. It means that companies that have a truly inclusive culture are 6 times more likely to be innovative. And innovation is one of those things that we all could use a little more of in the workplace. And then 75% of businesses with diverse frontline decision-making teams will exceed their financial targets, not only from 2022, which was last year, but and beyond. It just is one of those standard statistics that I think is just a powerful reminder of how this is really supercharging the Fortune 500 companies that we're reading about, the Google, the Amazons, who are embracing this, who get that this is part of their why, and they're trying to really capitalize on all of these statistics in order to do this. But if better decision making, if inclusive culture is not enough for you, then I'm going to give you a few more statistics that you can use as you think about building your organization's why of DEI. It means better employee engagement, where organizations with above average gender diversity and levels of employee engagement outperform companies with below average levels of engagement. It's about profitability. It's about performance. It's about employee attraction, right? 47% of employed millennials cite a diverse and inclusive workforce as an important consideration for employment. So everything really centers around your organization's culture, not necessarily around DEI, but a culture that embraces and allows for everyone to be heard, seen, valued, and respected. I can't say any more to you all about these numbers that don't speak for themselves. And so you all have to identify your why. Yes, you can adopt some of these numbers and say, yes, this is why it matters, but it always works better when you can look at your disparity across your community, your needs within your organization, and really start to craft why you're committed to this work by using that data as a way to sort of say, here's why, because we want to be more innovative. We want to attract more people to our community. We want to fully have employee engagement and member engagement that speaks to and aligns with our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're so used to saying, gosh, we just join the melting pot, join our chamber and just become like everybody else. What we don't say is, let's get beyond the melting pot and let's think of our organizations like salad. The metaphor of the melting pot is really unfortunate and it's misleading. A more accurate analogy for your organizations, and certainly the ones that I'm a part of, are I want us to be a salad. Though the salad is an entity in and of itself, the salad is a thing by itself. The lettuce is still distinguishable from the carrots, from the tomatoes, from the onions. We really want our organizations to have all the crispness, the freshness, the different tastes that come with something being all together, but we don't want it to taste like one big melting pot of a bunch of just nothing. We want it to have those distinctions. Think of your organizations like a salad. I was talking with someone this morning who I had taught at Institute, and she said their class shirt is going to say be like a salad, or we're like a salad, and I love that. So be like a salad as you think about your organizations. One piece that's really important that we don't talk about enough is assessment. Assessment is really key. And there are a variety of ways that we can assess where we are within our organization. So once you've done some of that base work about the shared language, you're all on the same page about what the words mean, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Once you've kind of started building your why, those facts, those figures, those statistics that you know you really should be looking more deeply into, you're asking why about, then we want to start with an assessment. And there's several ways to do it. I'm going to show you some really easy ways, and then I'm going to show you something that's maybe a little bit more advanced, but certainly another option that's available for you as you think about creating that why for your organization. The first one that I want to share with you all is this strategy of understanding the DEI continuum. The DEI continuum simply says that if you're an organization operating from level 1, you're just operating from compliance, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the origins of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I like to think of it as a start. Okay, so I'm not saying anything bad about you operating from 1. But the point is we don't want to stay at 1. We want to move along the continuum. We want to move into beyond compliance, where we get it, we support it, we understand the work of D&I, and we're starting to put some small things in place. Maybe we just started a D&I statement and we're going to put that on our website. Maybe we just formed a subset of our board that is focused on DEI. Maybe we're just sort of making small steps. Then you're probably operating from 2. You're moving beyond compliance. Then there's 3, where you're starting to make that business case. You're making decisions, you're creating strategies based on those numbers, because you know you need more women on your board, because we know that workforce is struggling to find people, and the businesses in our community are struggling. And we know that we can do that by supercharging diversity, and we're creating a plan to be able to do that. That's what it means to be making that business case and operating at level 3. And then level 4 is where, your hiring managers are getting this. Everyone within an organization is like on board. They've bought in. They understand the value of it. They can talk about why it's important to them. And you're starting to create some policy and practice change. You're looking at where you're placing your jobs when you're looking for diversity. You're looking into how you're onboarding individuals. Are you partnering them with someone who might have a longer tenure there and partnering with someone new? There's a variety of ways we can, again, get to that inclusion, that spirit of inclusion, those 3 or 4 levels of inclusion, by moving into integrated. And then finally, we have inclusive and equitable, which is level 5, where you're focused on systems. You're focused on changing true systems, workforce housing. You're addressing gaps in education. You're partnering with your higher ed systems and community to think about what it means to go to a work-based competency model versus a time and seats classroom model. And it's kind of like those kinds of things where you're trying to take on big systems change. That's where we're operating at level 5. That's ultimately where everyone should be trying to get to, and then maintain. That's ultimately where the water line is removed. You know what's operating at the top, but you also know what might be swirling underneath the bottom, hindering your progress. That's the level that I hope we all can get to through this work. When we think about this work and doing it a little bit differently, I want to show you just another continuum that I think is important. This is how I like to look at it as well, is this diversity, equity, and inclusion matrix. You know what? You can be operating from the red, which is basic. All that means, it's the same as compliance. It means D&I is on the agenda. You might talk about it once a year. Maybe Black History Month is that one time where you have some special programming, but you're really not doing it any other time of the year. That's fine, because you don't have time, because you've got a lot on your plate. but we want to move into awareness, where we start increasing people's awareness and capacity to understand these issues. It's starting to become a topic that's a part of everything you do. It's a part of the workforce conversation. It's a part of a tourism conversation. It's a part of economic development. That's when you know you're moving out of basic and into awareness, when you start thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and the role it plays in some of those big things that are a part of your organization. Then we move into understanding and application. And that says, okay, we get it. We're aware. We know what we need to be doing. We think we have an idea of the direction we need to head. Now we need to apply that knowledge to our work. That we need to really make some changes. We need to create some board expectations. We need to provide some real training so that our members understand what we're trying to do and they get on board and sponsor us with their dollars to commit to this work, right? And then there's integration, and then ultimately sustainable, which is what I mentioned before. It means the water line is gone. This is how you work. This is how your organization considers D&I, and you consider it every day as a part of every decision that your organization is making, because it truly can be and should be that integral to your work, to your strategy, that it's something that you're thinking about each and every day. Not just one person thinking about it. Your whole organization needs to have this as just another tool in their tool belt to do the work better. And if you've gone through all of those methods and you think, okay, none of those will help me, then there's an opportunity for you to engage an organization like ours. But there's many out there that do a real DEI focused assessment, where the organization takes a series of questions. We give it to your board, we give it to your employees, we give it to some members, and we get some feedback from them based on those questions about where you are on your maturity level as it relates to D&I. And here, same thing, it's the same thing. Red is basic. You're operating from basic as it relates to direction and goals from your leadership in this organization. So that's all it means. It's not bad. It just means that we have a place to say, okay, let's create some strategies around your leadership team, your practices, your communications and outreach, your talent, all of those things. We have a way to create a path forward for you to get started. But again, this is a much more complicated assessment. You don't need that. You can start with the other two that I shared with you before. I also want to share a little bit about measurement. We have to measure what matters. We have to know where to tackle things first. Where do we start? And I want to share some really low-hanging fruit options for you all to look at as we think about DEI metrics. It's not complicated. You don't need a fancy dashboard. All you need is to think about things from this perspective. Some ways you can look at diversity, equity, and inclusion for your organization are this. Look at the demographics across your organization. Look at who's holding spots, who's staying within your organization, what makes up your leadership team and why. Oftentimes, those are the most homogenous groups, more of the same kinds of people that are leading leadership team. What might be some barriers that you can eliminate to make sure that you're opening up the funnel to allow more people access to leadership within your organization? That's something to look at, is demographics. Look at retention. Are you keeping all of your minority or underrepresented people in entry level and they're not rising above? Well, maybe you need to look at how long you're retaining them. What are the triggers for them leaving your organization? There's some really simple ways that you're already doing this. Your HR already has access to this information, but how are you utilizing it, measuring it, and actually capturing it and making it part of your business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion? Then there's employee turnover. Then there's adverse impact. Adverse impact is something that's really, we never talk about it because we're chambers. Everything should be good and sunny. But when we think about adverse impact, we're saying, you know what, we started an effort last year. We thought it was going to be a really great effort. We didn't have the participation. We didn't have the engagement that we thought we would. Well, you're taking a look at the adverse impacts of something you implemented, the negative impacts, how it might have hurt or hindered a community or a partnership or a relationship that you're trying to establish. Take a look sometimes at the not so sunny side of chamber life. I know it's few and far between, but take a look at adverse impact of some of the efforts you might have tried in the past, or potentially some things that might be adverse impact for things you'd like to try in your community. Look at candidate demographics, who's applying to roles within your organization. Look at employee advancement or promotion rate. Are the women being promoted at the same rate as men and vice versa? Those are important things to look at. Pay equity has been really huge. Just doing a pay equity study to make sure that you're paying people all within a band of pay and not sort of one person more who might have the same qualifications as another. Really look into pay equity because that can speak a lot to your commitment or your why for DEI. Also, employee resource groups. Now, I know a lot of chambers don't have employee resource groups, but it's one of those things that your members are really quite familiar with, or business resource groups, BRGs and ERGs. Who's participating in those? Is it just the choir of individuals who are like the LGBTQ plus BRG or ERG? Who's participating? Is leadership active? Do you have a really strong group of people that don't identify participating and cheering that group on? We really need to dig deeply into our BRGs, why we create them, and how to make them more sustainable as a metric for us to use as part of our why. Always net promoter score is always an option to think about. And then initiative focused DEI metrics that are like about your Black History Month celebration. How many people came? Who did you partner with? Those kinds of things. All of those are metrics you can track as it relates to creating the why for D&I. If all that still seems like, whoa, 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 we're in office, we've only got 1 or 2 people, Kuma, you're giving us too much to calculate and measure here, then just try this. Look at how many trainings your organization is offering related to D&I. And D&I is vast. It's not just anything that has the words diversity, equity, inclusion in it. It can be something related to emotional intelligence. It can be a leadership capability. It can be any one of those things. Just track how often you convene or partner people together around a topic that has something to do with D&I, and then tell your board about it at the end of the year. Talk about participation rates. Talk about the numbers of your board members that are in attendance to your events that are related to D&I. Do you have a visible purpose statement related to your commitment to D&I? And where is it? Is it on your website? Is it at the top of all your onboarding documents? Is it something that you showcase when you're trying to attract a member? So just looking and tracking where all the places are you have that purpose statement goes a long way to creating a really easy metric that you can keep track of year after year. And then, of course, the number of hours spent toward diversity, equity, and inclusion. Me personally, when I was at the chamber and I said, oh my gosh, board, you all have all done 15 hours of diversity, equity, inclusion training in the past year that I've led, I'm telling you, their chests got sticked out real far. They were really excited about that because I was tracking it, they weren't, but to be able to hear how much time they'd all dedicated to listening and aligning that commitment of they already had to the work of the chamber, it was very, very powerful. So again, really easy metrics that you all can consider as you think about measuring DEI for your organization. So I want to quickly go through building the business case because I want to make sure we have some time for questions. But I think it's important that if you don't already, create some group or some committee. It doesn't have to be a ton of people. It doesn't have to be all of your staff. It could be you, members of your staff and some of your board members, some of your members of your organization. Just convene a group of people to talk about what are the needs, what might be necessary, what kind of training you'd want to partner or provide for your community. That will be a huge way to showcase your why for DEI. The other thing is set that vision for what it is you are trying to address for your organization, name that your business case, and go forward. Really start and get intentional about creating pathways to get to that vision. And that again can be as easy as starting to measure some of the things we talked about. It can be about creating a D&I purpose statement. There's a variety of things that you can do to help set that vision, but you got to set it. You got to let your members know that you have a vision, because that's the only way they're going to know that they can support with their dollars and their participation, your commitment to that effort. The other thing I think is important is that you have to have leadership buy-in to embed these changes. And that's not just whether your CEO believes in this or you as a CEO of a chamber believes in this. It's like getting those leaders of the corporations that have your largest employer mix in your community. It's about getting them to create a coalition with you that, yes, we're a chamber, but our members are calling for this. Our member leadership wants this to happen. So really leverage the leadership, not just within your organization or your chamber, but those member organizations. Get that leadership to buy into this. Create an an ad in the paper that says we stand in solidarity with a population, or we commit this as it relates to D&I, to showcase the coalition of members within your community that believe in this work. There are many. You just have to ask them to buy in, and they most likely will. Also, be transparent with your staff. Consider people who are underrepresented. And I say that because oftentimes we just try to keep the ugly or the stuff that's not so pretty under wraps, keep it behind closed doors, leave it to an HR leadership problem. But the more transparent we can be, and what I mean is when we say we know we have a challenge trying to hire people of color in our organization or bring them to our community, the more transparent you can be in acknowledging the challenges you're having, what areas you know you need to work on, then that alone says so much for individuals who are wondering, are they serious? Is this chamber really serious about what they say? The more you acknowledge, yeah, we don't have it all perfect. We still need help. We need your help figuring this out. People will rise to the occasion, and your transparency would be key in letting them know that they have a voice and an opportunity to share that voice with you. Always try to offer consistent D&I training and development, not only for yourselves, your staff, but for your members, because they are thirsting for that. Or ask them to help fund bringing in a consultant or a trainer or someone to speak on the value of diverse hiring pipelines, or thinking about cultural competency as a way to make sure that you're approaching true inclusion within your organization. Not just doing it once a year, but trying to offer and spread out throughout a year. That consistent training and development would be so key for you all really creating that why for your organization. Always assess and measure your D&I efficacy. Find those couple of just 3 things that you think you can measure as it relates to D&I, but definitely try to assess where you are and then create some opportunities for measurement. So year over year, you're telling the same story, apples to apples, but the community is starting to see that commitment, and they're showing up not only with their participation in your Black History Month or your Women's Day event, but anything you're choosing to do related to D&I. And then lastly, I want you to report, communicate, and educate all the time. And what that means is in Tulsa, we had the State of Inclusion. The point of the State of Inclusion was to let people know where we as a community stood as it relates to inclusion. Have a D&I summit, have a half day, have an hour or 2-hour session, but just something that talks about not only where you've been, your journey related to D&I, but where you'd like to go, and really communicate that and educate your community about this. It's not scary. We need your help. We want you to come along with us, but we know it is a benefit for a thriving, prosperous community, which is what chambers are all about, right? We need that in our community. So as we're winding up, we've got about 10 minutes left. I just want to ask you all, I've talked a lot today for 45 minutes or so. I really would like that one thing. You could put it in the chat. You could just make it in your mind. You've heard a lot. You've heard about the words diversity, equity, inclusion. We've created some shared language. We talked about those statistics, that innovation, that engagement that was going to make the difference for your organization's why. We've talked about setting the business case and the vision and embracing measurement. I want you all to just say one thing. Put it in the chat. One thing that you think would be valuable that you'd like to go in and look a little bit more deeply on as you think about creating the why for your organization as it relates to DEI. While you're doing that, I'm going to leave you with a quote that's one of my favorites. I use this, I say it at the end of all my sessions, and it comes up more often than I would like, even when I'm not teaching a session. But it's from Lila Watson. She's an Aboriginal advocate from Australia. She has this quote that's just lit up my world. She says, "If you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." To me, that means that as chambers, as organizations, we can no longer just say, we're just here to help you, businesses. We're just here to help the community, right? It's sweet. I love it. But we can't just be about helping. We have to be about the fact that our liberations are tied up together. If we can't figure out how to make sure refugee and immigrants feel welcomed in our community, then we're missing out on that population. If we can't tell that with Black people and struggle and wealth gap inequalities are happening in our communities, if you're just there to help and you don't realize that your liberation is bound up with theirs, then nothing will happen fast for our communities. And that's the struggle I see us dealing with, is we're just not taking that approach of it's more than help. Our liberations have to be bound together. I hope that this call has been valuable for you all. And I just want to share the slide that talks a little bit about my contact information. If you all have questions or any needs within your organizations, please feel free to reach out to me. It would be a pleasure to help you or come train or do a session for you as well. With that, Cece, I'm going to hand it over to you and say I'll take questions, and you all just let me know if there's anything else I can do.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kuma. And we will go ahead and move into the Q&A portion. We do have a couple minutes. If you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and drop your questions either in the chat or in the Q&A box. There is an anonymous option if you feel more comfortable doing it that way.
Yes.
Just to start off, we did have a question. Is there a typical timeline for how long it takes for organizations to progress across the continuum or maturity matrix? I'm sure it varies widely, but is it typically a years-long process? Is it possible to move more quickly? Is it desirable to move more quickly or more slowly?
Yes, yes. I say hurry slowly, if that makes sense. That's what I would say about it. I would say that from wherever you start, it's probably a year to get to the next level. So if you're looking at from a basic maturity into something that's more sustainable or integrated, you're looking at 3 or 4 years. It's typically the length of a typical strategic plan. You want to make sure that you're considering D&I early on in your strategy process, and that you're slowly, incrementally thinking about what things will take you from basic into awareness, what things will take you from awareness into application, right? And so it is typically, I would say, a year from each of those phases. And it's typically, I mean, you want your board active, you want your staff active, you want someone leading the charge if you can. And usually that's a board president. It was always someone who I could rely on when I was at the chamber to like be that person to align with me, to push our organization along the continuum a little bit faster. Some believed in it wholeheartedly, but some cared about entrepreneurship. And that was fine as long as they were considering some of those underrepresented populations as a part of that commitment. So I could find a way to put D&I in anything to make it something that was a focus, but hopefully that answers the question. And I wouldn't say rush through the process. You want to make sure that you're dotting your I's and T's, but if you're giving yourself a year in between, I think that's an ample amount of time to really make small changes that you start to see big results in the following year.
Thank you.
Sure.
And so far, that is the only question. We did have another question of if the PowerPoint will be available.
Yes.
And yes, both a recording of this webinar and the PowerPoint will be available on the Institute website under our webinars and resource center. It's typically 48 hours after the webinar. I'll go ahead and just drop that link here. And additionally, just as a reminder, if you were not here earlier, Institute is a CAE and CCE provider. So if you are looking for credit, go ahead and email us for a certificate. And we'll give another minute. We have a couple minutes. So if anybody else has any questions, I will say, Kuma, thank you so much. You are such a wealth of knowledge in this area. And to our attendees, definitely take advantage of asking Kuma any questions you have. If it's something that you thought of after today ends or something that you thought of but didn't ask today, please reach out to Kuma. She is a great resource. And thank you so much for your time.
Of course, pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, looks like we don't have any more questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap up, give a couple minutes back.
Okay.
But please reach out to Kuma, and thank you so much, everyone, for attending today.
Take care. Have a great week.
Okay.
Cece, I'm going to log off unless you need me to stay.
You're good. Thank you so much.
Take care. Have a good one.
Thank you. Okay.